Hi, welcome to the DRH show where I have wide-ranging conversations with interesting people. We talk about all things psychology, mental health, and wellness. Today, I'm joined by a psychologist, Zana Busby. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Dennis. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here, Zana. So let's start off with you telling us your backstory, your trajectory in life, and how you ended up doing what you're doing.
Yes, certainly. I think I got hooked on psychology long before I consciously recognized that I will practice it professionally. When I was a teenager, I think it started then in some sort of way. Friends would constantly confide in me. They would ask for my advice when they face challenges at school or with dating or when they bickered with other friends or even when they, I guess, just wanted to trick their parents into giving in whenever they wanted to get something from them. So on reflection, most of the issues were trivial, but they seemed so big and serious at the time. And I have to say, I did enjoy helping friends. It's not like I never consulted them too. It just, I guess, that they were after my counsel more often than I was after theirs. Mind you, I was a good child at home and at school. I guess it helps, when I mentioned that I had to be because both my parents were educators. My mother, primary school teacher, my father, professor of history of art. But I guess in some ways psychology was always there, if you know what I mean. But when I was deciding what to study at uni, for some reason, um, I never thought about studying psychology. I thought maybe studying languages would be good. Definitely, I wanted to avoid economics as I'm not big fan of maths. I liked medicine, but didn't fancy the idea of seeing blood. So I was sort of, I would say, pretty much confused. And after deliberating for what seemed like an eternity for me at that time, when my father mentioned psychology, that was the eureka moment for me. So here I am. Originally, I come from North Macedonia, and my study started in Macedonia. So I did also study in UK when I relocated there almost 30 years ago.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you found your eureka moment at a young age. Now,
Yes.
it's quite a common story that when people share their journey and how they ended up doing psychology, they sort of share that they're really interested about, interacting with people. They interested about the intricacies of human behavior, so to speak. Now, of course, psychology is such a wide-ranging field. There's so many, areas in psychology. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the area of specialization that you focus into is business and consumer psychology. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
If you could just tell us what exactly is business and consumer psychology, and if you could just identify some of the application of that area.
Well, consumer psychology is all about how we behave as consumers. It draws very much from psychology discipline. And I think me as a business psychologist, the fact that my experience and education, but also my curiosity allow me to be able to interconnect, I think, different concepts, schools of thought and research from psychology, neuroscience to now, not that I don't pretend that to be a neuroscientist, but this is just an example of my interest. And I think all of these make my work really interesting. So you see, the fantastic thing with applied psychology is that I can anchor it to absolutely any industry. because psychology is at the core of our lives, and as such, we really can make good use of it. It helps us to deal with our personal and professional challenges. So, although I started my career in mental health, and I've been doing that for many, many years now. I think that, with consumer psychology, what's interesting, I can draw from my past experiences because, for example, in the mental health area, I specialize in anxiety disorders, depression, and relationships, which of course means helping people who experience emotional and psychological distress. And the work that I do in consumer psychology is basically helping brands, helping businesses to sell their products and services in the most helpful and sustainable way. What is of particular interest to me, where I specialize when it comes to consumer psychology, is about the role of emotions, the role of behavior, gender differences, and our attitudes, how we behave. I guess as consumers and as humans.
What I want to ask you, Zana, is that could you give us some of the most important attributes for people who are in the people-facing business? What skill set should they have?
Mhm. Well, it goes without saying that a customer-centric approach is a cornerstone when it comes to offering psychological services. But then that's true for just any other business, really. If you want to drive your business in, I would say, in an upward spiral, you have to put your clients at the heart of what you do. You need to cultivate positive traits. Having said that, some of the things that are most important, I would say, to me, are trustworthiness, integrity, honesty, transparency, and definitely clear communication. I practice all of this in both my professional and personal life. And whether I help a client with their emotional or intimate issues, psychological issues, for example, when someone experiences psychological distress and they ask for my help, or when they need advice and guidance with some issue concerning their professional life, I always seek to create a safe and comfortable space for all my clients so that they can express their thoughts and feelings with confidence. And I think that's very important because when you work with people and when they come to you and they want your advice, they want your help, I think it is really frustrating and unpleasant when our expectations, what we expect initially from the service, doesn't match. I'm talking here like when we think like after, before and after. So before we have certain assumptions, how we want to, what we want to take away from the help that we are getting, and if we don't get that, I think that's very uncomfortable and it's not nice. So I personally, what I preach is what I practice. And as I said, I like transparency beforehand and I like clear communication. I think that's very important. There have to be some ground rules, if you want, before you start working with the client, and client has to know about it.
Absolutely. Those skills are really essential, like what you mentioned,
Absolutely.
transparency, being genuine with your client. And I think
Mm.
it just helps your relationship in the long run, not just obviously as a
Yeah,
psychologist and as a client, but also
yeah,
just two human beings talking to each other. Now,
absolutely.
I understand, Jana, and correct me if I'm wrong, but at some
Mhm.
point you've also done work in psychotherapy. So if you
Mhm.
could just explain to us cognitive behavioral therapy and clinical
Mhm.
hypnotherapy. How do these approaches differ from other
Mhm.
approaches in psychotherapy?
Mhm. So, as I said, I started my professional career in mental health area. specializing in anxiety disorders, depression, um, chronic stress, also relationships, the social relationships, intimate relationships, as well as work relationships. As I said, that means helping people who experience emotional and psychological distress. So now psychology is really broad. It's a really vast area. We have different disciplines in psychology, for example, clinical psychology, educational, forensic, sports, child psychology, uh, counseling psychology, and so on and so forth. I guess that there are a couple of factors involved in how I develop my preference for cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what I usually use as a modality in the help and services that I offer to my clients. So I think cognitive behavioral therapy to me means something that is very sort of practical, tangible. That doesn't mean that I don't use other modalities or that I don't draw from other therapies, for example, client-centered therapy or humanistic therapies, even sometimes psychodynamic, but not that often. So I think it's mostly like combination of different approaches. I even use coaching sometimes if that's required, depending on the problem that our clients would present. However, cognitive behavioral therapy is something that I practice, and I think just the principles on which these therapy space, and that's I call that like sort of triangular dynamics, if you want, because one of the main postulates of cognitive behavioral therapy is that the way we think influences our feelings, which in turn influences our behavior. So by the way of comparison, if we think that, for example, that someone what doesn't like us, there are different, all sorts of different examples, but just for the sake of description and explanation, if we think of a particular person, let's say your friend, and you think that your friend doesn't like you anymore, or that your friend is avoiding you because for few times in a row you haven't been able to meet each other when you wanted to initiate contact, then of course you're not going to feel happy about it, or excited. You may feel frustrated, maybe a little bit angry or sad. You can have all sorts of feelings, and then these feelings actually will affect your behavior. So you will say to yourself, maybe that's it, I'm not calling my friend anymore, whereby in reality you know there might be completely different reason why you were not able to meet your friend. Like, for example, maybe he's not feeling well, or her, she, or maybe they're very busy, all sorts of different reasons. But when we are stuck to just one idea, just one thought, assumption, I would rather say, then, we need to test that, just to explain it in sort of simple terms, how the cognitive behavioral therapy works. So I think in that respect, it is a very valuable sort of therapy that I use with my clients, and especially because my focus is in anxiety disorders and depression. This therapy proves to be, very successful with these sorts of mental conditions.
And of course, it's not just the kind of modality that you implement within the psychotherapeutic process, but also your relationship. And as you've mentioned, you rather have an international background, and I could hear it from your accent that you actually are, yeah, you are multilingual. So could you actually tell us how important it is that you could actually speak more than one language when you're interacting with your clients?
Look, it's not really important as a psychologist or as a therapist to speak different languages, but it does really help. So I guess in that respect, I'm in advantage. So I speak fluent English, obviously, minus the accent. I speak fluent Serbo-Croatian, obviously my native language, Macedonian. I can just immediately convert when I speak English with someone. If someone is, for example, Montenegrin, I can switch to that one. And I've learned that language by default, if you want, because one of my best friends in UK is from Montenegro. So I guess of the years, I just latched into, their way of speaking, accent, and so on and so forth. I can have, strong conversation with people from Bulgaria. So I understand Bulgarian language. I'm not completely fluent, but yeah, it's okay. I can work it out. I used to be, I have to say, fluent in Russian. So it might come surprising that I forgot pretty much, of that language. I guess you have to practice it continuously in order to, be fluent all the time. But I think because I was so good, I studied for, quite a few years at school, and then the first year at uni. I guess if I sit down and open, the books and start reading and, just focus my mind into it, I will need maybe, maximum of 6 months, I would say, to just recover the language completely. I do understand, but sometimes, most of the times nowadays, it's difficult for me to sort of, reply in Russian. I would rather reply in English or Macedonian or whatever other language, Serbo-Croatian, it doesn't matter. So,
Okay.
yes, over the years, I had clients who were from who were speaking these languages, and especially Serbo-Croatian and Macedonian. So it does help. Sometimes I get clients that want to work with me just because I speak these languages fluently, and they find it easier to express themselves, their thoughts, their emotions, and so on and so forth. So it does help. It gives me an edge. And yeah,
And
it's great.
and so talking about client, I would imagine because we're still in the middle of the pandemic, the lockdown is still going on. As a psychotherapist, as a psychologist, what would be your advice when it comes to coping with the new normal?
Well, obviously, we had the pandemic going on now for what, almost a year. It started, when was it? Last March, when we started experiencing something different at the beginning. I guess all of us thought that, well, it's going to last a couple of weeks and then it's going to be fine. But it seems, since then that most people's mental health has been affected. There are so many cases of anxiety, of people feeling depressed. And I think that most of us have really started to pay attention to our happiness, our well-being. Basically, I would say that happiness and well-being have been at the forefront of our daily life since the pandemic started. We have questioned the manner in which we live our lives, how we conduct our relationships, what matters most. People have been questioning the damage humans inflicted on the planet. Then, as always, talks going about climate change, the wildlife extinction. Um, Many people have even started questioning the, I would say, capitalist system and our consumption patterns. I think there is an ongoing conversation between, I would say, those who find themselves in denial camp, and another categories, people who are more realistic in realism camp. And I'm thinking here about starting from the top level, from the government level, multinational corporations, smaller businesses, down to you and I as individuals. So, however, on the individual level, what's important here is how our own beliefs about happiness affect our well-being, our willingness, motivation to take the matter in hand. I mean, the situation is what it is, but certainly happiness is difficult to pin down, let alone measure. And I guess people define what happiness means to them. We are not all after the same things in life. Different things make us, happier or, stressed out. Although in general, we know, what most people prefer and dislike. However, that shouldn't stop us to look after ourselves and how we can improve the quality of life in any given circumstances, especially with what's going on now with the lockdowns, and it's winter, at least in North Macedonia and the UK. It goes without saying that good sleep hygiene, healthy food, physical activity, humor, surrounding yourself, with positive people, all of these elements of positive well-being, I think, make a tangible difference when they are all practiced at the same time. And I would say in whatever you do, always choose quality over quantity. I think that's very important thing.
Absolutely. And now let's just move on to slightly something different. Aside from you being a psychologist and a psychotherapist
Okay.
and a mental health advocate, you also write a number of articles for PsychReg, and I'm really grateful for your contributions to PsychReg. And one of the most recurring themes that you write about is emotional abuse. So if you could just give us some points on what are the most important things that we have to be aware of in relation to emotional abuse.
Well, yes, I did write about it, and I think that that became sort of more prominent. Not that do not get me wrong, it's not that it didn't existed before the pandemic, but I think with the circumstances that we've encountered with the pandemic, there were, the emotional abuse. I would rather say a domestic abuse, if you want, because that incorporates different elements of what abuse means. And certainly one of it is emotional abuse. I think all that got more prominent. It increased. There were so many cases in UK and around the world where all the lines, all the organizations that and channels that deal with stuff like that, they were reporting that the cases have increased. So you asked me about emotional abuse. So what I would say about that, obviously, this sort of abuse is more difficult to recognize because it's not very direct to the outside world, if you want. It's more covert because it happens on a psychological level. So as for example, with physical abuse, you can see, someone can be beaten up and then you see their whatever marks on the face or bruises and cuts, things like that. But with emotional abuse, basically, this bruising comes here in the mind, and you feel it like inside your bed, inside your body. So it can come in the form of silent treatment. It can come in the form of gaslighting. It can be insults, putting you down, basically bullying you. All these sort of things are mixed together, and they form the emotional abuse. And it's absolutely unpleasant because the consequences can be very damaging for anyone. It eats into your confidence, your self-esteem can go down, and I think the pain could be almost same as if you were inflicted physical harm. You feel it. It brings you sadness. It brings you like this internal pain. And I guess, yeah, me as a psychologist, I help people with that, and yeah, I think it's very important to recognize that that's something that is not acceptable. It can happen, between family members. It can happen in partnerships, like in committed partnership, whether that's marriage or between people who, I don't know, a boyfriend and girlfriend, and so on and so forth. It can happen at work, and that's workplace bullying. So it's very important to know how to prevent it. It's very important to know how to deal with that. And obviously, it's important for the person who is inflicting the emotional or psychological pain to recognize why they are doing it and to find ways to stop it.
Absolutely. And I think that's where, you have to recognize if you really need help, you have to seek help with a mental health professional, a psychotherapist.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Aside from you working within the field of mental health sector, I understand you've also written a number of books. Can you talk to us about your book called Life Equilibrium?
Okay, first of all, I have to slightly correct you. I would have loved to have written a number of books. For
Okay.
now, it's number of articles, but just one book.
Okay, just one
Uh,
book. I'm sure
yes,
something else will come along the way.
yeah, absolutely. Well, the book is called Life Equilibrium. It was written a few years ago. It was for the Macedonian market, because I've written it in Macedonian. I thought at the time it's something that it just felt that I had to go in that direction. Okay, but the book is now being translated in English. Very soon, it's gonna be on the shelves. I hope in UK, definitely online. So it is sort of self-helping book. The idea about the book came from my experience of working with clients, working with mental health problems, and I thought people would appreciate if they had something tangible, something that is not written, for my peers, people, who are psychologists or close to that field. I just wanted to be for the general public to understand few important things or concepts, to look and read about the most common mental health problems. Obviously, in the book, I speak about anxiety, I speak about depression, but I don't just do the theory. I give etiology and symptomatology of the different conditions, but at the same time I offer some practical steps that anyone can take in order to help themselves. So it abounds with advices like that. It takes into account just our lifestyle, what we do, how we conduct our lives, how we can communicate in a healthy way. There are chapters about anger management, emotional intelligence, as I said, anxiety, depression, stress. Then I include the diet, also physical exercise. How all this, when they're sort of meshed together, how they can help us to live a healthier, more productive, more successful life.
Absolutely. And I understand you also deliver some keynote speeches. So do you also talk about the same stuff, or you also try to make psychology more accessible? Who usually are your audience when you deliver a keynote talk?
First of all, I absolutely, definitely like my audience to find whatever I'm talking about or writing about really easy to understand. So what I tend to do, I tend to sort of convert any psychological research or articles in psychology that are academic articles, to convert them in something that is easily understandable. In respect of who my audience is, I would say anyone can be my audience, because I'm talking about psychology, and psychology is a discipline that is applicable to any of us. It's it's about humans, and it's about helping us how to lead our lives in more positive, more productive ways, at home, at work, in the world. So what I do, I speak obviously in the retail industry. That's what I've done with Retail Reflections. So keynotes there are mostly about consumer psychology. And again, as I said, it's about how our emotions as humans, our behavior, our attitudes, how all of that affects how we behave as consumers and how we make our purchasing decisions. I can always come from different perspective if you want. As I said, I'm trying to be I try to make my keynotes really engaging. Obviously, they're always based on any, they're evidence based. Okay, I convert the results from research or what's new in psychology, neuroscience, in consumer and business psychology. I find ways to convert that to make it into something that my audience will find very interesting. I also speak about obviously mental health, relationships, these sort of things. Approach it again, as I said, from if you want, 360 degree. It's a holistic approach. So I always sort of mix and mix, and very often when a client wants me to speak about something in particular, I can either just make a completely new niche keynote speech, or I can just, if they like it, I can just pick and mix from what I've already done, and it just makes a brilliant combination. So yeah, I'm always happy to do that. I like
Yeah.
public speaking.
Absolutely. I could tell it that you have really the skill to engage in a public in an easy,
I hope so.
digestible way. And it's not a skill that every psychologist has, because especially if you are a researcher, you tend to focus more on the statistics, you tend to focus more on the technical aspect of psychology. But I suppose just like what you've mentioned, to be an effective speaker, you have to learn how to engage with your audience. Now, you mentioned a lot of the things that you do in relation to mental health. And I would imagine that along the way, you've come across a number of misconceptions about mental health. So if you could kind of identify some of the
Yeah.
misconceptions and sort of address them.
Yeah, I guess you are completely right. There are quite a few misconceptions, and obviously, me being long in the industry, yes, I I'm still coming, across some interesting misconceptions that they're usually based on assumptions that lack empirical research. I would say they come from what is again, I would say something called like naive support, naive scientific perspective, when you don't have that supported by empirical research. And usually that's result of misinformation that people can, when they get exposed to inaccurate information that is reinforced in the popular media, or when the things are oversimplified, taken out of context from concepts coming in pop psychology. For example, one is that most mentally ill people are violent. The people who just want to sort of steer clear from anyone who is suffering with some psychological disorder. However, this public perception does not reflect reality. Yes, it's true. Some people with psychiatric disorders are aggressive, or they commit crimes, but certainly and usually other factors are involved, such as substance abuse, for example. Another one is that opposites attract, meaning that we are most romantically attracted to individuals who we find, differ individuals who we think that differ from us. But that's again, it's only a myth. The truth is that we are, the truth is that birds of a feather flock together, if you want. We are after similarity. We are after people who, are similar to us in terms of attitudes, personality traits, uh, outside interests, values, or belief system. Even people who are from similar backgrounds to ours, and some other characteristics that lead to attraction. Mm, in any case, psychological studies consistently find that two individuals, they're more likely to be friends, to be spouses, if they're similar in terms of their personalities and interests. Um, After all, I think that when it comes to breaking up in relationships or divorce, I think when people realize that they have opposing values, or that they don't really have mutual interest, especially when their goals start, going in different direction. I think, when they display behaviors that are not sort of, matching, things like that. So I think it's there where we can see that no, opposites don't attract. So I think that's just a myth. Maybe it's interesting to see someone, at the beginning of the courtship that is different from you. You people sometimes think that what we lack in ourselves, as in a skill or personal trait, something like that, we can find it in another person, but doesn't really work like that. As I said, we have to share a few things that are, same, at least similar with, who we are and how we are and what we want. Another myth that I've come across many times, especially when I meet people for the first time, usually at parties or, any other gathering. The moment they hear that I'm a psychologist, many of them instantly sort of like freeze, or they, instantly you can see that they become more reserved. Like suddenly it's this face movement, body language that says like, oh, I have to be careful now. I mean, and it's not just their body language, but some of the people just, directly tell me, oh, I have to be careful, or maybe you can read my mind, things like that. Or I've been asked to describe their personalities after we've exchanged just a few thoughts within, first 5 minutes. Well, to be honest, I'd like to be able to read minds or accurately assess someone's personality just within the few minutes, during our talk. Um, I I love to be able to assess their character, the temperament within seconds when I meet them. But no, as psychologists, it's not given some specific, particular paranormal abilities and skills. No, it doesn't work like that.
I'm glad you emphasized that, Jana, that so psychology is not really some kind of like a pop field that would really allow someone to read their minds, or know exactly what their personality, or how they're going to behave in a particular situation. Now, for those who are listening, because a lot of people who will be watching this interview, they might be students and they're interested to follow your path. So can you give us some advice on if anyone wants to be a psychologist or a psychotherapist or a mental health advocate, what would be your advice?
Well, first of all, you really, really have to like people if you want to get into that discipline. I mean, it may seem like, trivial statement, but it's very true, because it's about people, it's about human beings, and you will be working with humans, during your career, whether you are mental health psychologist, as in clinical psychologist or counseling, or whether you are consumer psychologist, business psychologist, Still, this work requires, working with people all the time. So I guess lots of reading helps. Preparing yourself beforehand to really understand what psychology as a discipline involves. Now, I guess some people would, like to be more on the research side, some on the therapeutic. And I guess I would just mention, I think that's another of the misconceptions about psychology. When you mention psychology or psychologists, people usually think that all psychologists are therapists, psychotherapists, but that's not true, because many psychologists can work in the research field, which is different from what mental health psychologists would do. So yeah, read about it, find information, try to think beforehand, if you can, which discipline then you would want to enter once you study and finish your undergraduate degree in psychology.
And talking about looking for information, is there a particular individual or a particular book which has the greatest influence on your work?
Well, if we are talking about my personal opinion about it, and what I follow or what I'm interested in, what kind of work. Um, in general, I think what I believe is important to be selective. It's important to surround yourself with people who inspire you and make you a better person in both your personal and professional life. When I say that, it means that, not just people, surround yourself with people that you just personally know, or, as in your friends, family, colleagues. I think you can surround yourself with these people virtually, like through their books, their work, their articles, their research, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to accepting influence, whether we do that consciously or subconsciously, I think that's the process that develops over time. It's not just one-off event. It has to be something that you're exposed to several times. For example, a belief, an attitude, new perspective, something that is really interesting, something that resonates with your own beliefs and values in order to be influential. So in that respect, in regards to developing my academic education, you know, yeah, it's maybe cliche to say that my parents, definitely started me off on that journey. They installed in me certain values, such as being continuously curious, not stopping learning, helping and respecting other people, and so on and so forth. So I guess that was sort of like stepping stone for me then to sort of base my direction in who I'm going to follow, if you want. But having said that, the greatest influence on my work definitely comes from the industry field, but I can't really think of just one particular individual, because my mind is just so curious. It's I'm not tied up to one specific idea or one specific influence source. So I guess there's an eclectic mix of a few influential psychology leaders whose work I follow. Like, for example, one is Martin Seligman for his work in the area of optimism, pessimism, resilience, depression. Albert Bandura, definitely, for his, how he approached the therapy, his contribution into it, especially clinical psychology, with his theory of self-efficacy, self-control. The other day, I was just reading work from Richard Wiseman. I'm so sorry for the phone going on. It's just a landline. I like his insights. So that's an interesting perspective about the psychology of luck, and it really helps to explain the fate and destiny if you're really interested into it. And when it comes to research in emotions or positive psychology, I think I would mention Barbara Fredrickson for her work. That's really interesting. What else? I certainly like to look into any research that concerns common mental health issues, especially when it comes to the treatment of anxiety and depression. I do love Carl Jung's work. Now he describes, personality types, and that every person is predisposed to sort of be dominant in either extroversion or introversion. And I have to say, I just find it, when it comes to Jung, I find it fascinating how he brought astrology into psychoanalysis, because you see, astrology is something that I'm very interested in. It's something that I've been studying in my free time, and I can definitely say that it helps to explain personality types, just from a different perspective. So whether you look at your personality type from the psychology or astrology perspective, I think there are many similarities.
Brilliant.
And yeah,
You actually captured my interest when you mentioned about astrology.
okay.
So if you could just talk to us, how does psychology interact with a scientific discipline such as psychology?
Listen, Dennis, it's going to be a long, long, long talk if I start talking about it. But I guess, I'll mention a few things. As a matter of fact, Jung talked about the archetypes in psychology, and in astrology, what we can say, the 12 signs of the zodiac represent the archetypes in Jung's work, which are psychological patterns, or we can say models that inhabit the collective unconscious. So Carl Jung was sure that within each human being exists an innate disposition, if you want, to be what they really are. It's something that we don't acquire it, rather we are born with it. So this is where I can see the connection between psychoanalysis and astrology, because astrology suggests that there is an inclination to live in a certain way from birth. So some people, think, oh, astrology is some whatever superstitious or quasi science or something like that. But the thing is, with astrology, we can learn more about our personalities, about our strengths, our weaknesses, our likes, dislikes, and things like that, or how we interact with other people. It's not something that is deterministic. Obviously, you have free will, but it's sort of some imprint that can show you a picture of, sort of who you are, if you want. So in astrology, there are 12 houses in the natal chart, just as there are 12 zodiac signs. People often read about, horoscope, sun signs, something like that in media. That's something, just, it's purely for entertainment, because it doesn't really tell you anything, to be honest. But the dynamic interaction between the planets, houses, aspects, modalities, and elements that, all are contained in astrology, all this paint a quite unique, I would say, and complex picture about your personal journey throughout your life, about how you're gonna develop as an adult, even about your profession. So, for example, you might share the same date of birth, same horoscope sign with the next person, but everyone has their strictly individual story, I would say, that depends on different astrological factors. It's really a complex subject that I enjoy reading about. And listen, perhaps we can discuss it in another podcast. We can
Yeah,
make special podcasts about just, this connection, relationship with astrology and psychology.
Yeah, we can arrange that at a later point. It obviously requires a lot of time to talk about
It
this,
does.
and yeah, and
And it's very
as you've mentioned, yeah, and as you've mentioned, I think one of the take home message from, if we're going to talk about astrology, is that
Mhm.
it's not really a deterministic kind of area, but as you've said, it's more of philosophy and trying to understand personality from a different point of view.
Yeah.
What I want to ask you this time, Jana, is you've done a lot of work with mental health, with psychology, and with psychotherapy. So, what's the big message? What's the most important thing you want the public to know about your work?
Well, what's the most important thing I want to know? I guess it would be knowing that my work is split into two areas. As I said, one part of my work consists of mental health and well-being, and it's something that I've been doing for more than 20 years. The other one is consumer and business psychology, and I've been doing that for the past few years as a chief psychologist within the Retail Reflection Consultancy, which is all about consumer behavior, retail, and stuff like that. So, in the mental health area, as I mentioned earlier, I specialize in anxiety disorders, depression, and relationships. That's, these three I would say, particular area of interest because they're all important and they're sort of, for example, anxiety disorders and depression are comorbid. They can affect the relationships, then the nature of our relationships and how they are conducted. They can affect, obviously, our mental health. And it's all about helping people who experience emotional and psychological distress, whereby the work I do regarding business psychology or consumer psychology involves coaching, it involves consumer behavior, it involves keynote speaking, which I said I can introduce a wide range of psychology infused topics that any business or industry can greatly benefit from. So I think the fact that my experience and education, but also my curiosity, allow me to be able to just interconnect different concepts, schools of thought, different theories. All this make my work really exciting. So
Uh,
yeah, you can say
I,
that I'm focused on two fields: mental health and well-being, and then also business and consumer psychology.
and I'm sure it's not just an exciting work that you're doing, but it's also busy. So, Jana, how do you relax? What's your distressing outlet?
How do I relax? Okay. Well, I would say, first of all, I'm really grateful that I have close family ties. I have fantastic friends, an intimate circle of friends that act as a stress buffer. Some of my friendships even date back from nursery years, so they're long-standing, they're deep, they're intimate, friendships. So I truly enjoy spending my free time with my friends, with my family, chatting, laughing, having a bite to eat together, walking, stuff like that. Relationships are really important to me. I have to say that. Um, Another one is, yeah, I like to be physically active. I find the fitness regime very invigorating. But when I say regime, I still like to do it on my own terms. So I like to visit a gym and then, exercise there. But likewise, I like to just get out in the nature. I like to swim, as I said, walk in the nature. I like to play tennis when I can. Basically, being physically active is something that really makes me relaxed, and it clears my mind from accumulated emotional and mental junk, and it helps me sometimes to think about different ideas, different concepts, bring decisions, stuff like that. um, Another way of that I find relaxing. It's and some of my friends find this really amusing. They just can't comprehend. Is the fact that I like to read psychology before going to bed. I've done that for years and years and years. Then I sort of stopped doing that, but then I'm doing it again. So yeah, they don't find it relaxing. Other people don't, but I do. And yeah, I like to watch comedies. I think I need a laugh in my life like never before. But I think, within the past year since the pandemic started, we all need much more of that. So yeah, these are the main things that make me relax, make me calm, make me more energized, if you want.
And yeah, I echo what you said. Self-care is really important, especially if you're within the mental health sector. But I'm just curious to hear, what do you think you would be doing if you didn't work as a psychologist?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Listen, I went through quite a few professions when I was a little girl. One of them was to be a fashion model, I have to say. One of it was being a ballerina, then working in a circus, being a teacher, so on and so forth. I ended up doing psychology, but I have to say, in the past, I used to work as a fashion model when I used to live in North Macedonia. So that was my career. It lasted for about 15 years since I started. I think it was I was 15 or something like that. And then yeah, I think that if I wasn't interested in something from academia like psychology, I think I would have continued doing that. Obviously by now maybe I wouldn't have worked full time in that job, because you know how it is with modeling. But yeah, I can't think of anything else actually. I love being psychologist. I love what you do, and I can't quite imagine myself doing something else, to be honest. My fantasy, my imagination, it's not so creative when it comes to deciding what else I would work except being a psychologist. So yeah,
And you
I'm
managed to
stuck
fit
with
in your
psychology for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and you managed to fit in your interests with fashion, with consumer psychology and business psychology. So I
Definitely.
suppose it's a good compromise in a sense.
It is.
Finally, Jana, what else is in the pipeline? And if people wanted to reach out to you, what platforms can they get in touch with you at?
Okay, right now, at the moment, okay, people can reach me through the Retail Reflections site, which is www.retailreflections.co.uk. But there is something else going on at the moment. I'm in the process of launching my new online business. Well, it's not really completely new because I have been doing it for many years prior to joining Critical Reflections. As I said, I was in the mental health field, and this one is about offering mental health and well-being services. And it's more, I would say, of a revamp, if you want, with the new website, new workshops, webinars, and things like that. And I have a couple of more ideas in the pipeline to implement soon. So I think that's something that is, will take immediate effect in the next couple of weeks, because the thing is, the pandemic changed our everyday routines and habits in ways that we hardly ever imagined, especially when it comes to our freedom of movement. So many people experience confusion, fear, anxiety, depression. It's a depressing time, sort of for many people. So I would say I like to be able to help them, and I hope that they will find my psychological services helpful. But yeah, they just need to wait for a little bit more until I provide more information about how they can find my psychological services.
Brilliant. Those are exciting news, Jana. So what I'll do is I'll put the link to Retail Reflections on the description notes. So anyone who wants to keep updated on the launch of your new website, they could get in touch directly with you. Well,
yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, Zana, it's been a pleasure having you here on the DRH show, but unfortunately our time is up. I look forward to hearing more about your work. Lovely talking to you.
My pleasure, Dennis. Thank you very much for inviting me on your podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.